Hey everybody, Corey here, coming at you with another knife review. Today we are taking a look at the Chaves Ultramar Redencion Street 229. Yes, it's a lot. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. I try to put out new knife-related content on a regular basis. As always, let's start with the standard size comparisons. We've got our conventionally small knife, the Ontario Knives Rat number 2, and we've got our conventionally large knife, the off-grade Knives Scorpion. And honestly, I didn't realize how small this knife was. It is not much bigger, at least in terms of overall length, than the Ontario Knives Rat number 2, and it's about 1.25 inches and 1.5 inches shorter than the off-grid Knives Scorpion. For some other knives that you may or may not be familiar with, we'll do two more. Here it is next to the Benchmade Mini Crooked River, which again, I guess I never realized it is a little bit smaller than the Mini Crooked River, even just by 1/8 of an inch-ish. And then last but not least, here it is next to the Spyderco PM2. Trying to stack them butt to butt. You can see 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch smaller than the Spyderco PM2, and you can see that I like my brass anodizations here. Obviously, speaking of, while we're here, don't expect to find this one in the wild. If you do, I sold it, but I have no intention of selling this right now. But this is customized by the guys over at Way of Knife up in Traverse City, Michigan. So I just want to put that out there. This is not a stock configuration. This was just plain titanium before they did their work to it. So without further ado, let's get into the review of the Chaves Ultramar Redencion Street 229. So first, let's talk about that name. I wasn't going to talk about this, but just for the record, Chaves is a custom knife maker. The Ultramar designation on any of his knives, if you ever see a Chaves for sale and it's called the Ultramar something, that is the designation that it is the production version of a custom knife. To my knowledge, they are all manufactured by Redencion Knives over in China. So that might be the difference. If you've ever seen one of these and for some reason they were like $800 or $900, it's because you were looking at a custom, not a production. Okay, so let's start by talking about the good. Now, if you watched my last knife review, this is going to annoy you a little bit because I don't want to beat this to death, but it falls in the same category as the last knife I reviewed, the Redencion Iron X. It is very stout, and it's kind of stubby, right? Again, whipping out the Rat 2 here. Again, didn't realize how small of a knife it was in terms of overall length. It does fill out the hand infinitely better than the Rat 2. But again, I mean, look at these two knives. We're dealing with two completely different animals here. It is thicker on all accounts, right? So, of course, it's going to be more substantial than the Rat 2. But it gives you, with the thick blade stock and with these, God, these handles are so thick. And especially down here where your hand is resting on this not gaudy at all pocket clip, sarcasm, it's so big. It feels like a chubby bunny, honestly, but it does it in the best way possible. It inspires confidence. It doesn't just feel ridiculous. Is it a bit of a brick? Yes, we'll talk about that later. But overall, the stoutness makes you feel good. Again, I always reference this even though I'm not that guy. Feels like the kind of knife you could beat the crap out of on the job site. Feels like the knife you could cut open cement bags all day and do all your work. You just know it can handle it. It's so sturdy. So that's what I want to say about that. Next up, it's a versatile cutter. Now, normally I can't really praise knives for this with a blade stock thickness that's this thick, but they do a really good job. You can see right here about 1/3 of the way up the knife, they start that swedge, and it's a pretty aggressive swedge. You can see the tip of the knife. What that means is that this is really the only point where you're getting that full blade stock thickness. So the thickness isn't really interfering with your cutting the whole way down the knife. But there are two sections of the knife to notice here. This is obviously a compound grind. What you have here, closer towards the heel, is a hollow grind. What you have here, closer towards the tip, is a flat grind. Now, what that does is it reinforces the tip, and it makes everything up here just a little bit more rigid, right? You could argue it doesn't cut quite as well as a hollow grind, but I can assure you this thing still cuts like a monster. However, when you're doing your slicing, you can do most of that down here because that's where the hollow grind is. And I thought this was a gimmick at first, but honestly, I can tell a noticeable difference when I'm cutting with the hollow grind section versus the flat grind section. So again, if you're the kind of person who's really going to put this to use, you might end up using that flat grind section more than you think. That might be the part where you really want to get in there and maybe, you know, do some things that you might not want to risk with a thinner blade or a thinner edge, such as the hollow ground section. So that's pretty cool. Next up, just take a look at it, right? My customizations aside, you never see a Chaves and don't know if it's a Chaves, right? Especially when you get on this side and you see his signature clip. It's got a very unique look, and even though it doesn't translate necessarily well, you know, in terms of the best ergos or the best carry, whatever the case might be, he does something that actually makes him stand out from the rest of the knives these days. And honestly, at this point, that's a bigger deal to me than anything else, because so many knives, I don't even want to buy them because they look like something I've already had before. So I can really appreciate that. And oh, by the way, this is a Gen 4. He's made a few changes over the year, but with Gen 4, he actually started including a normal looking pocket clip. I don't have it with me right now, but it's a standard titanium. So along with the skull clip, if that's too gaudy for you, he gives you just a normal looking flat pocket clip. So that's pretty cool, because honestly, there was a time when I was interested in these and the clip alone was enough to make me go, oh my God, that is so not me. So that's nice. Finally, last but not least, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this. This is made by Redencion, and you can tell. I have no complaints about fit and finish. Pivot doesn't back out, screws don't come loose, it assembles fine, no lock rock, no blade play. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. If you know the work that Redencion does, this is no exception. Next up, let's talk about the bad. The jimping is stupid. I'm sorry. Maybe if we're talking like exclusively meant to be used with thick gloves, it'll be nice for really grabbing those thick gloves. But for 99% of people who aren't going to be using this with gloves, it just hurts. It really does just exclusively hurt. I mean, yeah, I guess it does grip your thumb, but it hurts, and it doesn't have to, right? Like Spyderco has jimping that's just as effective as this, if not more effective, and it doesn't feel like it's eating your thumb. So again, that's something I'm not going to beat to death. It looks cool, right? It contributes to the aesthetic of the knife, but it's just unnecessary. It's just uncomfortable, right? Next up, speaking of just sharpness, edges, right? The edges of this knife, again, this is what I'm saying about it's a unique look, but you have to like it and it has to work for you. Clearly, I mean, look at this, right? On no knife have I ever seen an edge that comes to a point like that, and I thought, oh boy, that's going to be comfortable. And here's the thing. For the most part, the knife isn't offensive. One spot I can tell you it's a hot spot. It's this corner where it digs into my hand. That corner absolutely is just eating into your hand a little bit while you're using it. But really, for me, that's the only one I can call out. So you might ask, well, why are you making such a big deal about these edges? This knife works for me because it fits me. I do not have especially large or small hands. I have very average size hands. But what this means, in my opinion, is that on the street model, which, oh, by the way, street means it's the smaller version of the knife. On the street model, if you have even remotely above average hands, you're going to start falling off of this thing, and boy, can I tell you, this is not comfortable. Neither of these edges are comfortable. So it's the kind of thing where it's very polarizing, because if it fits, it fits. If it doesn't, it absolutely does not. And finally, the last thing I'll say, it slips into the pocket well, but it's not especially deep carry, which I'm not usually that anal about, right? Like, you only get that much coming out of your pocket, but just look at the thing. It's a brick, right? It's pretty heavy. It's just objectively thick compared to most knives on the market. Again, similar to the Iron X, it almost feels like another phone in your pocket. This one actually isn't as heavy as it could be. I'm actually surprised because I don't see any internal milling in there, but they've done a decent job keeping a knife this stout a little bit lighter than it could be. But it's really the thickness that does it for me. This thing wedges itself like a brick in the corner of your pocket, and it really does take up real estate. So if you're looking for like a gym carry, gym carry. If you're looking for a knife to carry at the gym, this definitely isn't the one for you. So overall, if I want to give my favorite thing, my least favorite thing about this knife, honestly, it's badass. As someone who like would normally think that this is cheesy, it's kind of cool that it's his thing, and it really does help you develop a sense of pride because nobody else does this, right? When you see this, you know it's a Chaves. It's on the outside of your pocket. Anybody who knows anything about knives knows that it's a Chaves. It's kind of cool. And I don't just mean this is badass, right? The whole thing is badass. It's thick, it's stout, it's cool, it's got sharp lines, it's got mean jimping. It looks like a mean down-to-business knife. And to some extent, that's just cool. I like it. It's cool. It's unique. And honestly, not going to come up with anything new here. What I like the least, it really is the jimping. It's really what prevents me from using this, especially if I know I'm going to be cutting for any extended period of time. This just isn't the one I go to. I mean, I will admit it might be the first one I go to if I have gloves on, but any other time, not at all. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Very interesting knife. Pick one up if you've been interested. Just, think of all the things. It's very unique, but it's very polarizing. Again, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you all next time.